Welcome to Living Christ, an offering of the Spark of Humanity Network. My name is Martha Holden. I am a member of the Spark of Humanity Network. This is Living Christ. The idea being that, go into it in this little book, but that there is something that we're able to call the Christ, which was within each one of us. It's a potential, and it's wanting to live. And we can make the choice to live into that potential. So let me read you the little book. This is in the process of becoming an animated video, but not yet. Christ, maybe not what you expect. The Christ sings life, streams the divine, evolves being, flows toward fulfillment. Maybe more than Jesus, as we understand Jesus. We'll get to that in a couple weeks. There is Christ in everyone. We can't get rid of it. We can deny it. We can do our best to mangle it. We can try to distort it. We cannot get rid of it. We're stuck with it. We can choose to live in harmony with it. And deeper, we can choose to join it. It is the nature of the Christ to attract, heal, transform, blossom. When we let the Christ be true to its nature, it grows. When the Christ grows, we don't know what will happen. Whatever happens will be true. 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 Probably lively. Scary. Maybe fun. Scary. Interesting for sure. Scary. Deeply joyous. Life. Worth getting out of bed for. Interested? Today we're talking about receptivity, or I am, unless you call up or zoom in. First we'll start with receptivity. Why is that relevant, or in what way is it relevant? We're talking about receptivity to the Christ. To the Christ principle, if you want to think of it that way. Or the Christ consciousness, some people call it. Or the Christ within. The Christ stream, I've heard it called, that is flowing through every one of us and bringing us, who knows where, but it's interesting, and it's about life, and like evolution, it's happening, and our resisting it is only creates misery for ourselves. So in a way, practicing receptivity to the Christ is the way that we become closer to our true and basic comfort. We're not going to find comfort any other way, although if we deny it enough and mangle it enough and distort it enough, often we can feel like we're comfortable, or we can think we are when we compare our insides to other people's outsides, or our outsides to their outsides. But we're not really in that deep comfort, which is a function of our relationship with the Christ. So receptivity. Are we willing to be receptive? Do we want to be receptive? And even before we go there, or maybe along with that question, is do we take responsibility for what we are receptive to, from where we are receiving? Part of the literature or the publicity about this video series is that it's a conversation toward mucking out the stable. Whether we think of it as a historical stable, 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem, whether we think of it as the stable of the Christian tradition, whether we think of it as our personal internal stable, the question of receptivity, part of wound up in that is, are we choosing intentionally, taking responsibility for being receptive to the Christ within us, the Christ around us, the Christ of whom we are members, of whom we are creatures? There's a lot of, to use the word of the publicity, there's a lot of muck around, there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of distraction, there's a lot of ugliness, dreck, whatever. They're harder, fiercer, harsher words, but let's stick with muck. There's a lot of that around, and if we just say, oh, I'm going to be receptive, until we have developed a practice, until we have somehow developed or invited or been graced with filters of some sort, something that will make sure that what we are being receptive to is the Christ, or some factor of the Christ, some function of the Christ. It may be the evolution, as we say, we're in a planetary process of evolution of consciousness. Being is being, if it's that, if it's the flow towards fulfillment, it's streaming the divine, it's singing life. Our decision, our faithful and consistent decision to be receptive to what we're calling the Christ. You can call it whatever you want, but here we are, so we're calling it the Christ. To be receptive to that, that is important, that's relevant to this whole process. Because the process is moving towards living in harmony with the Christ, being in harmony with the Christ, and then perhaps joining the Christ, participating in the Christ, perhaps even dissolving or melting into the Christ. That we're way before that, or at least I am. So, living in harmony with it. So that choice is, let's say that's made, that this is what you're doing, this is your intention, you're staying on this show, haven't turned it off yet, because you are at least exploring a decision, a willingness to live in harmony with Christ. And I'm bringing up the word willing, and it's a word I use a lot, because I find that willingness is the key to much growth, development, comfort. The willingness, if we're not willing, we can become willing to become willing if we want to. But that decision, that desire to be willing is really all that it takes. It's, as I said, it's like a key, because the Christ is alive. And like every living creature, every living being, it wants to, its instinct is to grow, develop, stay alive, live into its true self. And if it's within us, if it's essentially, one way of looking at it is the Christ within us is really our true self. So if the Christ wants to grow into its true self, guess who's sort of going to be dragged in toward its true self in the process? That's us. That's every one of us. So there's the willingness business here. I read about it being scary, fun, interesting, scary, deeply joyous. And it can take a while, it took me years, to sort of recalibrate my inner receptors, my whole inner network toward this, which I knew on some level was the deepest joy. This is where true comfort was, not any place else. That this is, and wherever it led me, because when the Christ grows, we don't know what will happen. So, and it can take a long time, and it can take consistency. Well, it doesn't require, it invites consistency, because who's consistent? I mean, maybe you are, but rarely, only I'm just beginning to become consistent. So there's that willingness to join the journey of coming into harmony with the Christ within us. And really, I'm thinking, I'm developing this, that when we are in harmony with the Christ within us, we don't really need to worry about what's happening around us, because the Christ within us will lead us. When we get into deeper relationship, it will lead us into what we're needed to be in order for the fulfillment of the Christ in those around us, in the situation and everything that's going on. So it starts with us. Maybe you know that great song, "Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me." It's the same thing. It begins with us, with our personal, unique relationship with the Christ, our coming into harmony with it, not to worry about anybody else. So that's willingness. I probably have more to say about willingness, but not at the moment. So there's a question of, and we're talking about receptivity here, is it relevant? Yes. And being sure what we're being receptive to, being clear about our intention about that. Intention is important. Our thoughts are important. Monitoring our thoughts, just being aware of them, making a choice. I think I won't think that. I think I'll just move my thought over in that way. And then the willingness to be receptive. And then, so how do we increase our receptiveness? How do we do this? I can think of two ways, and if you think of others, you're welcome to email us. The email address is on the show, on the screen here somewhere, sometime. For us at the Spark of Humanity Network, the Spark practice, which I'll run through in a minute, is what we find most helpful, most directly effective in coming into harmony with Christ, in developing, once we're willing, becoming receptive. Because the Christ is working on us, and usually, we're blocking it. because we don't know where it's taking us, and we don't know whether we can trust it, and we don't know whether we like it, and we might become one of those people or one of those people, and we just, there's this thing pushing us, and safety, comfort, approval, fitting in, they all seem to require that we, don't listen to that voice. We do not respond. We are not responsive there. We choose not to be receiving, not being receptive to what is being beamed at us. For whatever reason, parental, societal, cultural, whatever, and just personal. So the Spark of Humanity practice is built on the understanding, the insight that there is a spark of humanity in each one of us, and that it can't be extinguished. It's like the Christ in that way, but I don't think they're the same thing quite. Different dimensions maybe. You can figure it out for yourself. Welcome to. That the spark can be defended, it can be baffled, and it can be distorted. It can be all three, and in me and many of us usually is all three to some extent. So, but when you, through your spark, connect with and affirm the spark in someone else, it strengthens their spark. They don't know it necessarily. Probably they don't unless you tell them, which I wouldn't do because that may increase their defenses. Just strengthen their spark. And it seems that the strengthened spark acts to erode the defenses, clarify the bafflement, and release the distortions. Because the way we're understanding it is the bafflement starts the moment we emerge out into the world from the safety of our mother's womb. We're baffled. And in order to survive, we feel we need to develop certain distortions in order to get by in the world. And the distortions are painful, and they're not true. Basically, they're distortions. They're not who we truly are. And so we develop defenses because they're painful, and we don't want to realize that we have to be in pain in order to survive, and we don't want people getting close to these painful distortions, because if they get too close, we'll probably strike out at them, and that won't have a happy result. So connecting with the spark begins to dismantle that whole structure. And so we become more available. So strangely enough, and it took us a while to really be willing to admit this in the spark work, is that as you are connecting with my spark, because of course you recognize my distortions and my defenses, and I need to be fixed. That's very clear to everybody, right? But what's happening is that you're strengthening my spark is also strengthening your spark. So subtly, your defenses are being eroded. Your bafflement is being clarified. Your distortions are being released. And as you do that, then it's easier, you're more receptive to the Christ doing what it can to inform you of the path, of what will bring you comfort, what will bring you joy, what your ultimate fulfillment is. So there's, on the website, we have exercises, we have meditations, we have a lot of my talking about this. So that's something we can recommend, put out there as a way of increasing, augmenting the receptivity to the Christ. It's just do the spark practice. Try it out. Keep trying it out. It takes a while. At least it took a while for me and many of us. So just give it a try. The other avenue that I'm aware of, and there may be others, and you're welcome to get in touch and let us know, please, to facilitate the receptivity is gratitude. And possibly just gratitude for, I had breakfast this morning, I'm grateful. I have a roof over my head, I'm grateful. I have legs, I can walk, or whatever. I have a good wheelchair, whatever. That sort of gratitude, that of course is always good. But I'm thinking specifically of gratitude for the receptivity. Every little bit of receptivity that we recognize in ourselves, if we're grateful for that, then we'll become more receptive. It's the way it works. Like you're watching this. You may or may not be paying attention, but you're watching this, and that's a sign of some receptivity. You can be grateful for that. And what I find is gratitude acts like a growth medium. So whatever we're grateful for tends to increase. So if we want receptivity, be grateful for the receptivity we have. And be really grateful for it. And pay attention to it. Be aware. Am I more receptive today than I was yesterday? That's good. One of my stories about being non-receptive on my part, because it's subtle, the way that the Christ at least works on me. There's a line in one of the Psalms, I will guide you with my eye. Do not be like horse and mule who must be fitted but with bit and bridle or else they will not stay near you. I was packing, I was getting ready to go on a trip. And I was at the drugstore picking up whatever, my meds, whatever. And there by the cash register was a box of, to be sold, mints lozenges for dry mouth. And there's a way that my eye is attracted to certain things. I have another friend who has the same phenomenon, which is why I dare bring it up. And there's a way it's sort of like my attention is drawn to that. And I, being the crusty New Englanders that I am, it's like, oh, I don't need that. I can do fine with that. And I'm just, I'm not spending money on something I don't need. And that's, put out there. Who knows who's making a profit off that? I'm not having anything to do with it. Well, of course, sure enough, on the bus the next day, I can't remember, I didn't have water, or the bus didn't supply water, and I was dying of thirst. And boy, I wish I'd gotten those lozenges. Thank you for pointing them out to me, and thank you for pointing out to me that when my eye is caught by something, in some ways, that's how, one of the reasons we have to start, or not to start, we have to continue being sure that we're being aligned with, what can we say, our purpose in being in harmony with the Christ, aligned with the Christ purpose. It doesn't make any difference how you language it to yourself. It's that choice to explore this reality, to expand into this reality, and see what it's like, and develop your own relationship with it. I can only tell you what I've done and the people I work with have done. It's unique to you. I don't know the way for you. And at this point, you probably don't know the whole way for you, but at least you know where you are right now. And that's crucial, so you can be grateful for that. I'm here. I'm willing to consider embarking on this process of living Christ and letting the Christ live in me and through me. Letting the Christ live me. That's fairly dire and extreme, but that can be where we go. If we choose, we can cut off the process whenever we want. But we can choose that. And we can realize that, I've realized anyway, that when I cut off the process, that just creates misery for myself. So I'm more willing to have the powerlessness, the lack of control of having the Christ live the life, rather than me with my feeble, selfish attitudes. It doesn't work for me. Anyway, may it work for you, and or whatever may you choose, and know your choice and be grateful for it. Thank you for joining us. Take care.